Hello, David here, as David Flagg. David stands for Giant Killer, and Flag stands for Freedom. And God has started to rise me up, and basically, I haven't been watching hardly the news at all. I mean, not at all. I refuse to watch it. I mean, it's like the enemy's like gloating, and you know why I refuse to watch it? Because I don't want to eat pork. Do you understand that Satan's word and Satan's speaking is pork? I'm not going to eat pork, right? Because that's what you feed yourself if you listen to, Satan. And after listening to this episode, more and more, God is bringing the awareness to me. I just got finished watching the shocking prophetic timeline reveals what's next from Sid Roth, where Robin Bullock shares the prophetic timeline. More and more, I'm getting the understanding, that, back in the day when I read the Bible, I didn't realize that all the worship of these idols were demons, and the people, like Israel would go and wipe out these nations, and you would think, and he would always say, don't leave a remnant of them, and basically, that's, a lot of people don't understand that back in the day they didn't have authority over demonic forces per se. Like, you didn't see the casting out of demons until Jesus arrived, because the power of God, it took the power of God not only to heal, but to cast out the dominion. The key word is dominion. For example, when Jesus came, a person can be filled with 1,000 demons. 1,000 demons, and that's a force. And see, that's what we're dealing with, all these Egyptian gods that he was talking about. That was Satan, moving in all these people. And then if you look at another Sid Roth episode, where he's talking about how Baal went over to our land, and in the caves they found that Baal, the Egyptians had went over there and dedicated this land here to Baal. And then the people, it's not... When you do people can worship Baal and these gods in the United States and not even believe in them, because it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So there's people that are not Christians out there that follow God's word, and they're blessed. They get blessed because they follow God's word. Like, some people follow the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and they're blessed. And so you can be blessed of God by following his word and not even being a Christian. There's some people that aren't don't they believe that God is this universe thing, and they worship Him by this thing called the law of attraction. And really, all it really is people are having faith. And faith moves God. It's just like truth and science can move. Truth and science can move the release of the atomic bomb. That's how we won World War II. Is they found the truth, the power behind something. So you got these people that do the law of attraction and things of that nature, and they find power. and what's sad is that they have more faith than Christians. Do you see what I'm saying? They put something on their wall, on their ceiling, and they say, I'm going to get a new house and a new car. And they have faith, and they actually have more faith than some Christians, because Christians are too busy eating pork. And they don't know it. Christians can spiritually be eating pork and not know it by their worry and their fear. And there's a lot of pork out there from Satan. Like, Satan has a lot of judgment. See, another thing that Christians has, darkness increases as light decreases. Looks like Kevin Zaddy is going to be on here. Let me click on that so I can save that for later, perhaps. Watch that later. There we go. It's having trouble pausing it for some reason. But I clicked on it. It's on my history on my computer. But you can't spiritually be eating pork. That's why God's having people, like when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they heard the report of what was there, 12 spies, and 10 of them, I can't remember the exact story, but 10 of them gave an evil report. Do you understand that that's like eating pork? They're eating pork. Christians don't understand that their thoughts, as they meditate on fear or worry and all this stuff, that you're constantly eating a word. Do you understand that? You're eating a word. That's why I'm not watching the news and all this pork. I mean, it's not even been I've hardly given any mind at all. Because I eat enough, in my life, I lived 40 years of eating pork. As far as a mental way of thinking, I was in bondage. And mind you, we're 400 years, guess what? Listen to this. We're 400 years in 2 days from where we landed on Plymouth Rock, and we basically took this land. Believe it or not, the diseases that we brought wiped out 90% of the American Indians when they landed on Plymouth Rock. They had contact with the Indians, and the disease, the viruses, went through the land of the Indians, and it prepared the way for this land to be taken. And here, 400 years later, we were fighting a coronavirus that really affects very, very few people, but everyone's all in fear. This wiped out 90% of the Indians. And it basically cleared the land for, it cleared the land for the United States to be born, And a lot of people could look at that and say, That's great evil. And I'm not going to get into the judgment of that, but this nation has been a place where God could flourish, right? God wasn't flourishing through his people in Europe. Satan had infiltrated that place where at one point they were burning people at the stake for making copies of the Bible. That's how bad it had gotten. And then King James Version came, right? And the Bible was released, and that was really how the birthing in the United States of the gospel that's flourishing to this day. And 400 years was the beginning. I think wasn't it the time that they were in Egypt? Because I've heard some sort of prophetic breakthrough for November 11th, because that's 400 years where there's supposed to be a shaking or a moving at that 400-year mark, which will be November 11th. Now look at all the things that we're going through right now. You know, the Democrats have taken control. I've heard, even at my job, people saying, well, the certain communities, everybody went out to vote, you know, to try to defeat Trump in these certain communities, especially when it came to these people that basically are not following the will of God. You got to understand, if you're a Christian, you eat pork, as far as mentally. If you mentally are focusing on fear and worry, like the children of Israel, they feared. They heard the evil report, then they feared. And they were magnifying, and you can magnify how big Satan is. Because Satan is the one that, when the children of Israel had sinned and ended up in 400 years in Egypt, is they killed innocent blood. They killed a tribe of people that weren't totally innocent, but all they did was sleep with one of their daughters, and they rose up and took it in their own hands and murdered an entire tribe of people. And their blood, there was innocent blood there. People that had done things that they cried out. And then you see famine fall on the land immediately, and then Jacob and everyone's in Egypt, and they're in prison for 400 years. So sin can bring a nation to its knees. And then Satan, of course, he took over the land of Egypt, of Israel. He totally took over the land, because that's what he does. The land also represents the heart, right? For example, 100 years ago, radio spoke, just like in Genesis, radio spoke, and it transformed the image. Satan's always trying to change anything into his image. Like Oprah will say, well, why? Oprah will make a statement like, oh, they were born that way. Well, in a sense, she's right. They were born that way. They were born in that spirit. And God had given me a revelation about kinds of spirits. The other day, he was talking about there's kinds of animals in Genesis. And then after that, he's saying, well, there's kinds of angels. And then he showed there's kinds of demons. And now us as humans, we remember Abraham Lincoln made the statement, there are better angels come forth. Because we're in a place where Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So he did that to try to wake people up. Fears of spiritual darkness, worries of spiritual darkness. And if it dominates, then Satan will prevail. It's one way in which Satan can prevail, if fear and worry dominates. The other way that Satan has dominion is by sin. Sin. And then the other way that we have dominion is by the blood of Jesus Christ. You'll see in Revelations about how they overcame by the blood. So there's certain things that gives us dominion. The blood basically keeps your sins, that your sins cannot speak. There's no testimony against you. It's probably one of the biggest things Christians need to do is plead the blood, because the whole God the Father is attracted. I mean, he comes, the glory of God comes when when the blood is there. Like I told the story of how one day I covered myself in the blood, as far as by faith, like a high priest. And we have to be high priests. It's very important. These people that have been changed into the image of Satan, we don't want to condemn them and by the image of Satan, because Satan condemns everyone. These people that, Oprah says that they were born like that, right? You don't want to condemn them, per se, with a judgmental spirit. You want to have the same spirit Jesus had at the woman of the well, or the same spirit that Jesus had with Legion. Did Jesus come and condemn Legion, who had 1,000 demons, who had strength like a Samson? He could break chains. Jesus didn't come to condemn, not even Legion. If he's going to condemn someone, he would have condemned Legion. So when these people say they were born like that, it's a powerful spiritual force. And it's in a lot of Christians nowadays, you don't see deliverance from these things that Oprah said, well, they were born like that. And you're right, it's a powerful spirit. It's a powerful spirit. It's a kind of spirit. Like I was talking about kinds of spirit. It's a very dominant kind of powerful spirit. And it usually comes from abuse. For example, it comes from dominance. It's a very dominating spirit. Like in the Garden of Eden, Satan dominated Eve. It's always a dominant spirit, very dominant. Satan is a very dominant spirit, where God is a very humble, gentle spirit. As far as he doesn't push himself on people, where Satan will rape a child, Satan, in a sense, he molested God's children in Genesis. So Satan's that type of spirit. It'll transform these people into the image, and they'll be born and like that. And that's just not the only way Satan can, by a dominant spirit, can make someone gravitate and say they were born a certain way, they have certain desires. It's all a transformation of spirit. You got to understand, and it's not easily always seen. Just like our DNA, they're struggling right now to look in our DNA to find what causes diseases. But it's all in the DNA. And when it comes to spiritual transformation, you can eat certain combinations of Satan's spirit, and it produces a kind of spirit. And then people are that way, and they want to live that way because they love. If you've been transformed by one of these spirits, like one time I got involved in this. Satan has a plan, and Satan first dominated my mind by my parents. It was a spirit. It's like a dumb spirit. I just got finished watching. Let me show this real quick. Becky. Sometimes we don't realize this is just a spirit. Everything is always a spirit. The people in when these spirits dwell with you, and you don't know they're there, that's the whole trick of them. You think you were born that way. That's the deception. That's what Satan did in Genesis when he, excuse me for a second here, when he got a Trojan horse inside of us. Which is his ability to speak in our spirit. Like, you won't see Jesus. You will not see Jesus able to hear in the spirit as far as Satan whispering in his spirit. Satan had to manifest himself to him to speak to Jesus. And that kind of like, well, here's the enemy. He just manifested himself in front of me. But with us, it's different. He got access in Genesis by changing our spirit, our nature, into envy and strife and hate. And Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And so we are like chameleons. We can be like an angel one day and a demon the next. We have the potential to be like that. And you basically, you can be infected by whatever's around you. Like, for example, the children of Israel in the Bible, they heard the evil report, they heard it. Faith comes by hearing, but so does, in Genesis when God spoke to Eve, so does Satan's word also. Faith in his word. So evil is faith in Satan's word. See how simple that is? When you believe the evil report, you're having faith in Satan's word. That's why when Abraham believed God, it was counted as righteousness. And then when he believed God, he started appropriating or manifesting godly stuff. And one of the things he manifested was a promise of God. See how powerful the promise was? He got a promise of God, and it didn't even matter whether his Jacob was kind of a deceitful little person that stole his birthright from his brother. And with God, the promise overcame his evil nature. Because to steal from your own brother is almost like when Cain slew Abel type. It's not a good spirit, right? When you steal from your brother the birthright, that's not what Jesus talks about in the new covenant, where in the new covenant, the first thing he says, a new commandment I make unto you, that you love one another. And then he says, no greater love than a man that he lays down his life for his brother. That's supposed to be what's going down in the new covenant, right? And you don't see too many Christians manifesting that. And you see people caught up in spiritual gifts. I see a lot of Christians in the state where, and I've been definitely in that state for a long time myself, where you get a spiritual gift and you feel like you should dominate based on your gift, which is mine is a gift of understanding. You feel like you should dominate. People should pay attention to you. People should yield to you. And in a sense, it's true. Anybody should yield to anything that comes from God, right? But people get in this crazy mindset where they don't have love, and the spiritual gift dominates, and they just get like, God will show them something, give them a truth, but because they don't have love, they don't perceive the truth correctly. Like God gave this one person a dream. It was about some of these mega ministries. He said God showed this person what was wrong with this mega ministry. But because they saw it through their own eyes and not through the way God sees, then they spoke condemnation and didn't follow the new commandment that Jesus said. And because they did that, I've actually seen people die. Satan had domination because they're breaking the commandment. Remember, Jesus said, keep my commandments. So then Satan had legal right over them because that you reap what you sow. Do you see how it all works? You reap whatever you sow. If you sow evil, even though you hear the truth of God about something, but if you sow evil, then Satan has legal right against you, right? So what they're supposed to be is a high priest. Christianity in the United States has become so warped because they lost the power. They still had spiritual gifts, but they lost, and then they even lost that in a lot of churches. They lost the power. So then the only power they had is condemnation, which is a satanic power. And you reap whatever you sow. You reap what you sow. It's something that I need to wake up to. Wake up. Wake up. It's like, wake up. You reap what you sow. It's such a tricky little thing. Oral Roberts had it down pretty good. Anytime anybody did anything evil to him, he thought, well, I reap what I sow. Duh, I'm going to do good to that person. And his ministry just expanded and built up. But some of us just don't get it. But we got to watch the spirit that's in us. Even Peter wanted to split somebody's head open, you know. They were taking Jesus. But we see the revelation of what really happened. It was their ear. The way they hear. Their ear was cut off when Jesus tried to in the garden, tried to whack the guy right in the head with a sword, split his head straight open. But he missed and just cut his ear off. And Jesus, what did Jesus do? He picked up the ear and healed it. Because the problem is the hearing. Because hearing, like I said, we're not supposed to be eating pork. And that's what happened in Genesis when Satan got access to our spirit, which changes us into his image. As we listen to it, as we eat the pork, as we eat pork, just like the children of Israel that heard the evil report, or it's within yourself. It's a Trojan horse that you have to make sure you don't listen to. That's why it's so powerful when Christians prophesy, when they speak it out. They prophesy. To prophesy means you already heard it within your spirit. And you're allowing the born-again spirit to then flow and prophesy. You're flowing. It's like a dam that opens up. A dam is something that it has potential power. Like a dam can run powerful electrical, generate a powerful electricity, but it can't do nothing until it flows. It's just potential power. So when you speak, you have a spirit within you that came forth from God, which is God Himself. But it's just potential energy until you speak and you prophesy. When you prophesy and speak something, then it's like opening up the dam. It flows. And the Bible says, keep your heart with all diligence. Now, Satan, the battle is over the heart. Just like just like they spoke, the radio spoke, and people didn't think anything of it. In 1920, 100 years ago, radio spoke, And no one thought anything of it, but it changed. Everybody was listening to it, and it changed the image of the United States. Everyone transformed the image. It was called the Roaring Twenties. And then God, or not God, I hate to say that, God, because I don't even like that. Of course, God brought the judgment, but it was Satan that changed the image of the people, and then they started sinning. They wrote, as they're going to these dance clubs, the women are smoking cigarettes, the women are drinking. And I'm not saying certain things can't be done as long as God is in the center of things. Paul said all things are lawful, so I don't want to put condemnation on certain things. It's just they totally forgot about God. God was just gone out of the picture. He's totally out of the picture. And then they just started, just like in Egypt, they started doing whatever they thought he was gone. The next thing they know, they're worshiping the golden calf. They're having an orgy, and that's kind of what happened in the Roaring Twenties. They went out. They got it's so easily brainwashed by radio and Hollywood, and it's almost like the spiritual ground of the church through condemnation. People weren't drawn to go into church because God really wasn't there. Because just like the scribes and Pharisees, where God didn't. God just wasn't moving and speaking until Jesus showed up. It was dead. And in these churches, you go to these churches. I went to some of them. My parents sent me to church as a kid, and the church was as dead as a doornail. It was a Methodist church. It was called Trinity Church. I don't even know if it's still in existence. But it was as dead as a doornail. I guarantee you God wasn't there. There was no angel speaking from that place. God was not there. Because I went to that church in a time of need once. God did not speak. He wasn't in it. It was dead. And these are the type of churches that rose up. It was within walking distance of my house, and it was dead. It was a dead church. God was not there. So, that's, a lot of churches rose up like that in the United States. And then some of the churches had a condemning, they lost their power, and they could get people to come to the altar by condemnation. They call it hell and fire preaching. And yeah, it moved people to go to the altar, and some people even got saved, but it was an accusing type spirit. It wasn't. If Satan gets in something, he said, Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So churches can have a combination of darkness and light in them. And I don't want to get too deep into all this because I need to write a book about it to show the DNA. But it's tricky. It's tricky. We just going through trick or treat. And these things are tricky. And they have a treat. These things are tricks of Satan, and they always come with a treat. Like Jesus said to the scribes and the Pharisees, they have their reward. They were tricked by Satan, and they were given a treat. And that's what happened in all these churches. And then the ground is always looking for something. So when radio spoke, that planted seed in the ground, and you had the Roaring Twenties, and then the heart of the nation, which represents ground, was blown dust into the air, representing that there was no water in the soil. There was no water in the soil, and a famine in the heart of the United States. We had the Great Dust Bowl, where 100 years ago everyone was wearing masks, and that represented the heart. There was no water, no spirit in the church. And see, this is the church caused this all this rising up, where Oprah says, well, they were born that way. All of this, you got to understand, Satan's seed goes to ground that's dry and has no, it has no, it has nothing competing for it in there. Satan's seed will grow in that type of land. Then you get a jungle with all kind of creepy things inside it, like Legion. It has 1,000 demons. You get these people, and the demonic keeps rising in people, and people don't know that there's a demonic forest that has risen up in their culture. And these places where the demonic is powerful and risen up, you'll see manifestations of Satan there. There'll be killing, there'll be murders. Chicago, different places. It's not happening by accident. The demonic has infiltrated the culture, and it becomes normal, and all of these things become normal. And they don't know. They don't know what they're doing, that it's wrong. They have no fear also of cops. They have no fear. And that's another manifestation. They do not fear authority. They actually resist authority. And what's crazy about the whole thing is that God will bless. God blessed them in the Garden of Eden. They were blessed. They didn't have no fear. They didn't have no worry. And see, all of this was the beginnings of all of this. And basically, it's when Satan dominates in these areas and dominates in a vote, or even just trying to steal the election. Satan, he only wins by stealing, killing, and destroying. He tried to kill Trump's reputation with the media. That's a character assassination. So there's one manifestation of killing, stealing, and destroying. There's always going to be with Satan, there's always going to be the three: killing, stealing, and destroying. So, and these people will break the law because they believe what they're doing, just like Booth that killed Lincoln. They will break the law. They will break it and think that what they're doing is right. Because there's going to be a manifestation of killing. They tried to kill Trump. As far as a character assassination, I'm sure there's many of them out there that wanted to do even more. So that's one manifestation there. They stole, when Trump said they stole the election, well, yeah. I'm sure it's out there. And then the media, I'm not even going to talk about the media. But we're on in 2 days we're at a breakthrough point where things is going to have to start changing. Because 400 years is 400 years since we landed on Plymouth Rock, where God established this country. And it's been a tumultuous 400 years, for the country. But God's glory is supposed to fall. And I just think I was wrong. I made a prediction that Trump would win the election by 4:44 in the afternoon, and that was just strictly me. That was just strictly me just thinking that, that was strictly me just making a prediction based on that. God didn't tell me that. I just thought, well, since God is in the Bible 4,444 times, Trump will probably win the election by 4:44 in the afternoon. So I just threw it out there as a guess, and it was nothing God told me. I just made a complete guess, and in a sense, I'm guessing on this November 11th thing, because God hasn't told me any of this stuff. But I still think that there's something going on there. But what I did notice when it hit midnight on the 4th, that's when I saw Trump starting to rise. He started to rise. You know, Jesus rose, and I seen Trump starting to rise. And I thought, well, that's when I thought, well, by 4:44 in the afternoon, Trump will be president. He'll be, and it could have been that way. That probably was God's will, right? It was probably God's will. But I noticed when Trump spoke, he said some negative things, boastful. He put darkness out into the atmosphere. He said some things that were negative and boastful, and I noticed as soon as he spoke these words, that's when all of a sudden Biden started going forward. And the media just condemned him, and it really made me think when I saw Biden launch forward when Trump spoke. You know, it's important what we speak. Sometimes it's better we don't speak at all if we're going to say. Because see what happened is the media, all this word is speaking at Trump, the media, and everyone tearing at Trump constantly. That's Satan trying to get a virus inside of him. Satan is trying to get that virus, that satanic word, that pork, and they're trying to get it inside of him. And to be honest, they're fed off of his word. He reacts to their word and speaks something, and then they get empowered and they react and they speak back. So it's they're feeding each other. That's what I'm noticing. So Trump is like prophesying for evil at times, to be honest. He can't do that. And that's what's hurting him. So as Christians, we need to pray for him that God will make him the father that he should be for the next 4 years. Because if he's filled with bitterness and anger, these are not good spirits. Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And see, it's a battle for his soul, for what he speaks. And one of the things that provokes them is him thinking he's better than other people. The only thing that makes him better is his mind. Like, he doesn't dwell on negativity. He just has a productive type mind that says, I'm not going to waste my energy thinking about this thing. I'm going to waste my mind energy on producing something that I know I can produce. So he doesn't give energy to, and that's why he can sleep. He can sleep for 4 hours and wake up energized, because he's not feeding into the demonic. The demonic doesn't have an inroad into his mind. So what these people are doing is they're speaking, trying to get the demonic in him. They're trying really hard, and that's what it's all about. Because if they can get it in him, he'll produce whatever they put in him, and nothing but darkness is coming from them, right? So that's why we just got finished watching Sid Roth. They were praising God. They were praising God and laughing at Satan because Satan is trying to impregnate his people with his seed. So when they speak in tongues and they laugh in the spirit, they're laughing at Satan. It's what Satan's trying to propagate, because he really doesn't have power if you don't give him power. He has no power if you don't give him power. If you don't sin, he has no power. He has no legal right to kill, steal, or destroy. So what I'm saying is, it's important for Donald Trump to prophesy and speak and not feed the enemy, not feed the press, you don't feed the trolls, because they're trolls. That's what they are. They're demonic trolls. You don't feed the demonic. Because you're glorifying them and their power. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. Don't eat pork. Don't, because you are what you eat. So if you magnify Satan's word, it's just like, if you magnify Satan's word, then it's going to manifest, because you're being the bride of Satan, just to put it bluntly. You're being the bride of Satan when you magnify his word. You know, Satan, I got this day off from work today, and I was kind of mad because Satan put it in the ear of my boss and made him believe something. And all day I've been thinking about it, you know, because I see that Satan got to him. But I got the day off, but in truth, I needed the day off. So it worked out. Satan didn't do anything that God didn't let him to do, but it just kind of annoys me that Satan got through to him. But then maybe it's a reflection of me, if Satan getting through at me. But it's basically a time where we have to guard our heart. We really have to guard our heart. And we can't be Satan's bride. We can't let his word, even though even you can be a Christian and let fear, worry, all these things, you're not supposed to be the bride of Satan, because you will propagate, you will birth, by connecting to fear, by connecting to worry, by connecting to what Satan is saying. No matter what it is, whether it's be a sickness in your body, you don't listen to that stuff. You don't become its bride. You don't give it authority. You don't give it dominion, because if you do, well, you're raped with it. And if you're raped with it, well, you're going to produce that. Do you understand? So that's what I wanted to come on here and say. So that's why on this Sid Roth show, they just got finished prophesying and laughing. Sid was laughing in the spirit. So Satan is always trying to get that Trojan horse. He's always trying to get his word in us, because the word, Jesus, who is the word, came down, entered into Mary. The word entered into Mary. Do you see that? The word entered into Mary, and she birthed that, right? And we had the Son of God. So for us to make sons of gods and to birth to propagate Christ, we can't be the bride of Satan by allowing fear and worry and those things to dominate in our spirit. It's a very important thing. You got to keep your heart, because your heart is the womb. I don't know if Christians know that. Your heart's your womb. And that's really why women can be very powerful for Christ, because they have a larger womb than men. That means their heart is larger. They can birth. And that's why Satan kind of attacked Eve, because she, even though she was more sensitive to God, probably, more sensitive in hearing, she's also more sensitive in hearing in the spirit world. And that's why I've noticed people that are Christians, whether male, my last pastor was a very heart-driven person, very heart thinker, always in his heart, never living in the moment. And I tell you what, you can go to church, and if you were really in tune with God, God could speak through him. I could sit in the church and ask questions, and he would sit there and answer them as he's preaching. Because but I tell you what, when it came to, as soon as he stopped preaching, then Satan would drive him nuts. Because then Satan would dominate his heart. And fear and worry, like he'd worry about his message. He's like, when he preached the most fantastic message he ever preached, like when he preached to me, and it's like I'm sitting there, God's answering all my questions as I'm sitting there in the church just thinking them out. And he's just sitting there answering, and he would go home and think he preached the worst message he ever preached. And he would believe that. So you can see how a heart-driven person can be one or the other. So, and I've even heard that John Kirkpatrick battles that as he's preaching. There's a voice speaking to him, and he thinks he's preaching a bad message, because there's something speaking to him as he's preaching that's trying to get a voice in. And it's really insecurity is what it is. We all have it. We all have that insecurity. And that's how Satan gets the inroad in. But most preachers are heart-driven type preachers, I think my pastor, I think he could preach a good message, but I think Satan really dominated him when he wasn't, really dominated him in his heart. But he was a good preacher when he was preaching the gospel. The anointing was there and the preaching was there, and he could preach a great message. God could really preach to that guy. He was Baptist, didn't speak in tongues. But in his personal life, I think he had demons chasing him, and they were speaking to him a lot. And he was listening to him because he didn't know that that's how Satan speaks, and that's how God speaks to him, and that's how Satan speaks. And he didn't know that I don't think was supposed to worry or fear. And he would be filled with those things, and it was really a shame that he was dominated like that. But he could preach, I'm telling you. And it's a shame that there's Christians out there like that. So you really have to watch what speaks into your spirit. If you're a heart-driven type thinker, God can speak to you very easy, but if you're not careful, Satan can fill you with darkness. And Jesus said, if the light be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? You don't want to birth that stuff. You really don't want to birth that stuff. Because if you're listening to it, you'll birth it. Because Jesus said, you must abide in me. That's why it says, that's why it says in Joshua chapter 1 to meditate on God's word night and day. So, in a lot of these spiritual things, you can go into work and people have evil spirits. I was just at work the other night and a guy came up to me and Satan had just attacked me at work, and I felt like quitting the job. And this guy just came up to me and he's like, why don't you get out of here? And it's exactly what I was thinking. And the guy, Satan spoke through the guy. The guy's like, why don't you just get out of here? And Satan literally spoke through the guy to me. And I knew it was Satan because I knew what just happened. What I was thinking in my heart, I was ready to quit the job because Satan just used somebody and violently assaulted me at work. And I mean, it was violent. This person raged and did something, and I was just really, I was down because my boss, Satan used him. So I was really already down from that. So then when that guy assaulted me, I was like, well, this is just too much. And then this guy comes up to me when I'm in this spiritual place, feeling sorry for myself and all down in the mouth and dismayed. Like it says in Joshua chapter 1, be not dismayed. I was dismayed. And then because I was in that spiritual place, Satan needed somebody to speak through to try to just push me over the edge. So this guy walks up to me and he says, just in a whisper, and it came from his spirit, and he just said, why don't you just get out of here? And it was Satan. It was Satan. And the guy he had no clue that Satan had just spoke through him. He had no clue. And people are clueless when Satan speaks to them. But I knew it was Satan because I knew what had happened. But my problem is you have to trust in the Lord with all your heart. If your heart starts being penetrated by Satan's word, by things Satan does, like first he attacked me through my boss, then he attacked me through this other person that did something violent. So I was already weakened by what my boss did, and I was listening to it. I was meditating on it. I was at work, and it was with me. It was present with me. This evil thing that my boss did, and it was present with me. And there you go. That's what I'm listening to. That's what I'm meditating on. Is what he did wasn't right, and what he was believing wasn't right. But sometimes we just have to trust God even though I knew Satan was with him, he didn't have the legal right to do anything. Even though my boss was present, evil was in him. He had heard two serpents that spoke evil against me, and more than one serpent. And he believed their word, but even though he had believed their word, my boss didn't have power to harm me. But I knew that the spirit was within him. Because when he came, all hell broke loose at work. When he came in that spirit, it was like a portal of hell just opened up. And things went from night to day. It's just like all hell just flourished when he came. But I wasn't touched. I wasn't touched. But it shook me because hell came. And it came through my boss. So I was still kind of meditating on that the next day a little bit, not, kind of down in the mouth about, because my boss believed Satan, and I was mad about it because Satan got his ear, got a position of power, and I was down in the mouth about it, and that's when Satan assaulted me with this other person. Then the third assault was when that guy whispered. And said, "Why don't you just get out of here?" Because Satan's trying to make me quit my job. He's been fighting me on money because there's books I'm going to write, and he's just fighting me tooth and nail. And he doesn't want me to make any money. He actually stole my job from me 2 years ago, this coming January. He stole my job from me, but he had legal right. He literally had legal right because I sinned. And today, I tell you, after all this onslaught, there was a lot of onslaught. And what happens is, after you've been attacked this fiercely, you're almost in the state where Jesus wants to make. He didn't eat for 40 days, and he's Satan, wants him to make bread, well, out of a stone. And I'd have been attacked. I was even down a little bit about the Trump thing. So it was a combination of a lot of things. And basically, sin started looking really good, and I was really surprised. I thought, how could sin be looking good? Like this morning, sin was just looking so good. I mean, it's just looking like I just wanted to go run to it. I just wanted to run to sin this morning. It was just really. I don't understand how that happens. It probably happens because I ate too much pork. I listened to too much stuff what Satan said, and it depletes your spirit. And in Genesis, he says that if you doeth not well, sin is at the door. He says that to Cain, and I think that's what happened. I listened to too much. I ate too much pork. I didn't trust in the Lord and I didn't trust in the God. Now, if you trust God when situations happen, I mean, if you're not living in sin, Satan has no legal right. So if something bad happens, you should just trust God, right? That's hard for me to do. When somebody takes authority and does something, especially when they know I'm innocent in something, like they crucified Jesus, who was innocent. That's my weakness. When somebody does something to me and I'm innocent, that's when it makes me nuts. And I want to fight back and defend myself. And that's when the battle's God's, But Satan, it's like Joseph. He got promoted. He was innocent in the crime he was convicted of when he was in the Egyptian's house. And he got thrown in prison. And Satan had legal right against me about 2 years ago. I sinned. And he got me good. I mean, he got me really good. And there's still fear of that happening again, There's fear of that happening again, but that's not trusting God. That's trusting in fear. Because it happened, it's so. What he did to me was so. I can see Satan as the same scenario set up at work again. The same potential thing for history to repeat itself is set up at my job again. Exact same situation. Almost. And it makes me fearful. Because the thing that Satan did to me 2 years ago was one of the worst things he ever did. He actually got me in the court of law through false accusations. 3 people witnessed against me and just utterly lied. And I'm not saying I was an angel in the situation, but I was not guilty of what they said at all. It was just founded on a lie. And they prevailed in court, and I actually got a misdemeanor. And God had prophesied that it wasn't going to happen, but the fear dominated me, so God's hands was tied. I couldn't break it. This thing was so evil. The lies were so piercing that these people lied. The injustice was so wrong. I mean, this person just lied. And then 2 other people backed their lies. It was horrible. And I can see everything set up at work that this could happen again. But I know from experience, because I'd done the same type of sin that Satan had legal right, and he brought me into court another time. But that time I prevailed. I utterly prevailed over the person that lied. But this time, even though I repented of the sin, Satan prevailed. But I couldn't shake the fear because it was so powerful. The fear, the evil, the lie was so powerful. I couldn't shake it. And but the bottom line is, if I'm not sinning, if I'm not sinning, Satan has no legal right. I mean, that's the bottom line. He has nothing. That's why it says, put on the whole armor of God that you might stand in the evil day. The breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation. If you're not sinning, there's nothing Satan can do. So you can laugh at him. That's how it works. God's a just God, and if Satan goes in the court of law and he has something against this, well, he's got legal right, because God is just. And that's why judgment falls in a country or a person. It's all the same. But if you're not in sin, then there's nothing Satan can do. You're going to prosper. Just like Joseph. Even though he was thrown in prison, it was just to prosper. And that's what Christians don't. I see them not preaching. You've got to understand. You've got to understand, if you're in sin, and that includes speaking. If President Trump speaks an evil word, well, Satan has legal right. As a president, he has to be very responsible in what he speaks. So I noticed that on the election. I noticed that when he spoke, that's when Biden just started pushing ahead. So he's got to be, as a president who's sowing seed, he has to be very responsible in what he speaks. Very responsible. So that's the danger I see. As Christians, as high priests, need to. It's the media and everyone attacking him that's feeding him this negativity, then he's speaking it. It's a Trojan horse. So as high priests, Christians need to pray for Donald Trump that their word can't penetrate him, and that he doesn't speak it, because when he speaks it, when he speaks an evil word, Satan has legal right. So that's what I came here to say. That the Christians have to be high priests and cover his sins, because no one's perfect. Plus, they have to pray that he moves. How can he have compassion after all this evil's done to him? It's just like the same situation with me. These people that sinned against me is the worst thing that anyone's ever done in my entire life. I was almost killed by five black guys that beat me 33 times in the head, dislocated my shoulder, robbed me, left me for dead. And I had no animosity toward these people at all. I just thought, well, it wasn't personal. I didn't know them. They didn't know me. You know, it didn't bother me at all. It didn't faze me at all. I had no racism toward the black race because of these black people that did that to me at all. After that, I met a black guy on the street after I was losing my house, gave the guy $500. After that incident, I gave $15,000 to Africa for water wells. So does someone who's a racist do stuff like that? Of course not. But the people that worked that did this thing to me, I know it has nothing to do with their skin color. They were both black. Well, there was one white guy that stood with them as the third. But I understand why this person did what they did. The person was trying to be a father to his race. But unfortunately, you can't be a father to your race. You can't be a father to your own race, even though he was being a father and ministering to his own race and giving favoritism to them over white people. I mean, you have to do that in a sense. I mean, who's going to do it? Is the white man going to do it? Is the white man going to be a father to the black race? But what I'm saying is you can't be a father to that race if you do evil. And that's what this man did against me. He assumed that I was a racist, which was utterly, ridiculously wrong. He was so wrong. The only people I stood against at this job that was with him was people that were doing evil. And these people were evil. The person that I testified that I got fired, and I wasn't trying to get the guy fired, but I testified against him. And all I was trying to do is make the person yield to my authority because I was an authority. But this person ended up slapping my phone out of my hand, and I was just trying to have authority where I wasn't having. He did not heed my authority. He wouldn't even listen to me. He walked by me. The first time he cussed me out. And I didn't even realize, I totally forgot about it. I didn't even know it was the same person. So the second time, I bumped into the same person, and this time he just totally ignored me. I guess he figured he cussed me out once, and just cussed me out up and down. So I guess this next time he just thought he would ignore me. You know, like I don't exist, like my authority didn't exist. And that was the problem. That's the problem that cops have in certain neighborhoods. So this person just blew up he didn't even act like I existed. So I thought, you're not even going to listen to me? And I'm in authority? So I thought, well, I'm going to get a picture of you, and I'm going to bring it to someone who has more authority than me. And I wasn't trying to deceive. He wouldn't have lost his job or anything. But after he knew I finally got a picture of him with my phone, because I thought the guy wouldn't stop and give me his name. And so I thought I'll just get a picture of him, And I got a picture of him, and once he realized that I got a clear picture of him, he smacked my phone out of my hand, and it hit the ground, and I didn't even call the police on him. Someone else did. I said, well, this guy just slapped. I got him. I got a hold of my boss, and I said, this guy just smacked my phone out of my hand. And it wasn't my boss. It was a coworker. And they said, well, he says, well, if they touch you, we're gonna have to call the police, because they could cuss me out and assault me in that way. I mean, I was cussed out at this job. I had a guy scream at me for a full minute and just cuss me up and down as loud as he could scream, and I was just doing my job. Shall I be penalized for doing my job? I was just doing my job, what they told me to do. It wasn't even my message. You ever hear the saying, well, they kill the messenger? Well, that's what I was. That's all I was at this job was. But I have to say, it did become personal. It did start to become personal. And I should have handled it, now that I look back, I should have handled it differently. I shouldn't have let it become personal. I should have just went to my boss and I said, look, there's a problem here. These people are not heeding my authority. And if my boss wouldn't have given me the authority that I needed, I should have quit the job, because how can I do the job if I don't have authority? And my boss actually started cutting my authority. And then after he cut my authority, then the problem became crazy. And then he thought, well, I got to give him authority again, because they just took over. Just like if Israel would let people in their land back in the, it was their promised land, and if they just let everyone in their land, it'd be taken over. They would just take it, and that's what these people did. They took the land. In this scenario, I can't share exactly what it is, but they took the land, and finally my boss had to crack down on it. And it's just so frustrating, this authority boundary thing that people break. There's no fear of cops. There's no authority. They totally disrespect their authority, like they have no authority. It's dealing with people like that's just pure evil. People don't respect the authority of the presidency, and it's really a battle of authority, and it really began in Genesis when Satan got dominion. So to keep Satan from having dominion, we can't let his word penetrate us with fear and worry. We've got to stay on we've got to realize that if we're not sinning, Satan does not have authority. If there's anything I've learned, Satan does not have authority if you're not living in sin. So if you're not speaking evil, I never thought about the monkey thing. The monkey thing is hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. Huh. That's a powerful thing. I didn't realize how powerful that was. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. That's powerful. Huh. Very interesting. It just popped in my mind. So if you're clean, you're clean. Satan doesn't have power. But Satan has that little Trojan horse. He plants people, words of life or death. He plants words if you dwell and meditate on that death word, then he's got you. Because he's going to use you as his bride. If you listen to his word, you fear, you worry, even though you're a believer in Jesus Christ, and I've seen Jesus in a vision and heard him with an audible voice twice, that's meaningless. If you're the bride and listen to Satan's word, you can't do that. You can't be a believer you can be a believer in Jesus, but you got to be careful listening to his word, because that'll wear you down. And then sin will start looking good. Well, I couldn't understand why sin was looking so good this morning. And I tell you, I wanted to walk in it really bad, but that's why. It's because I was eating too much pork. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. So, but this is probably those, Jesus said you must abide in me. And he is his word. So be careful abiding in Satan's word, because if you eat that pork, you are what you eat. That's all I got to say.